right, good evening. Thank you for coming out to CONDG, CentralOhio.net Developer Group. Hello, YouTube. We are here today with Burton Smith talking about web components and unfortunately also web forms. So yay web components, boo his web forms, but that's really the topic of the talk, so I'll leave that to Burton. I'm Matt Eland and I'll be taking care of our housekeeping today. If you are on the Central Insurance Wi-Fi, please don't torrent any movies or download updates for whatever you got. So please device responsibly. Yes, it's Windows Phone, and yes, I did just recently gift my wife a Windows Phone for her birthday, saying that she could trade it in for a new iPhone if she wanted, and she unfortunately did that. But I still tried. If you are not following us on Meetup, if you're not subscribed to our events, check that out because it's a good way of you just finding out what we're talking about when. It's also really helpful if you RSVP before the week of the event because that helps us get an accurate count for pizza ordering, which helps my good friend Matt and Central Insurance out as well, as we are thankful for the food and drink they provide. So yay Central. But we do meet on the fourth Thursdays of every month. I always think it's the last Thursday of every month. Often it is, but it is the fourth Thursday of every month. I've made that mistake in a year and a half or so, so knock on podium or lectern. Hopefully we will keep on that. Our organizing team is Alan, running the stream over there, myself, and then Sam, who is cooler than both of us because he's often at Seattle hanging out with the Microsofties over there. If you want to help out in any way, come chat with us. We'd love to talk with you. If you'd like to give a talk or a talk that you'd like to hear here, come chat with us as well. So this month we are talking with Burton Smith over there about web forms, web components. Next month, this is not finalized yet, but it is likely or possible that our friend Chad Green from the speaking world is talking about what if your AI could be a team, which we're excited to see about. So we'll see if that happens. May is open. That might be me with my Star Trek talk. We'll see if we can get somebody better than me in there. And then Alan is talking in June about creating Visual Studio Code extensions, which is something on my mind right now as well. So that'll be a lot of fun. In July, we're doing something special as we always do in July, where we have little lightning talks. I can get up here, give a quick demo. Last year, I got up and I gave something that completely fell apart, and it was amazing. And that was the worst talk that we had. We had some really cool other talks as well. Demos, no demos, just talk about something you care about, something you're passionate about, that's tangentially tech-related at least. And then we're open for the rest of the year. We do not meet in November and December because the fourth Thursdays of November and December are a little problematic to get people to show up to, including the organizers. So that's what we have currently. We do have our active YouTube channel, so you can check out our past content. If you're feeling sick, if you're traveling, whatever, you can often stream. Sometimes we have a little bit of difficulties, but Alan does a really good job with that and managing that content there. So thank you, Alan, for that. And subscribing, of course, helps us out too, and liking things too. You can put comments on Burton's talking about the things that he's messed up, and I would appreciate that. We are out there on Twitter. We tweet like almost never, so if you wanted to help us with that, that'd be nice too. But we are on Twitter. We do also have a LinkedIn group, which we don't do too much in, but sometimes we will post like job opportunities or cool new libraries and the like. The one that's a little bit more active is our Discord group, which we just kind of chat about tech. Matt in the back over there is really good about pushing out .NET news there, and that's always fun to see. I often will learn new things from that, so that's a lot of fun there. Again, thank you to our sponsors, our hosts, Central Insurance. They are lovely people to have in the community. They're lovely people to know. If you are here in person, just some event logistics. If you need the bathroom, go under the stairs and keep turning left until you reach the bathrooms, and that should help you out there. If you find somewhere that doesn't look like a bathroom, retrace your steps. And then we have more pizza and drinks over there as well. So please feel free to get up during now or Burton's talk. Just be quiet and respectful as you do that. And then thank you to the .NET Foundation for sponsoring our group. They pay our meetup fees, which we really appreciate. It helps us do the things we do. And they're really cool. So Star Trek, raise your hands if you've heard of Star Trek. Star Trek is awesome. It is a conference going on, I think, May 1st this year. It's the first Friday of May. And it's at the AMC Easton. We take over the full movie theater, and we have talks throughout the day. I think we have like 64 talks this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then afterwards, we are doing different movies from our logo over there. So these are all retro movies. The K, for example. Any guesses as to what the K is?
Back to the Future.
Yeah. Spoilers, but yes.
Wait, so there's not one movie? There's multiple?
There's 8 movies, yes.
What?
Yes. Yeah. So you get to pick which one you want to go to afterwards. And before that, you get to see a lot of cool people speaking there. So that'll be fun. And me too. So if you want in on that, we do have a link there for the ticket sales. You can also go to StarTrek.com. We also have the call for sponsors. So if your organization is looking to sponsor, we are still accepting sponsors there. And then I believe we're still accepting volunteers. I'm not certain if that's true or not, but scan it, fill it out if you want to apply. You get to show up really early in the morning, but you don't have to pay anything. And you get to attend some talks as a proctor and things like that. So cool stuff. Show of hands, who here is hiring right now? Okay, host wins first privilege. Matt, what are you hiring for? Central Insurance is hiring for.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm getting the title correct. Infrastructure tech.
So Central Insurance is hiring an infrastructure tech lead. If that's interesting to you, chat with Matt afterwards. If it's interesting to you online, check out Central Insurance there. Alan, you were over at Improving.
Yeah, we're looking for, I know, at least 2 .NET sort of senior level, I think. Positions maybe slightly lower, depending on how we can convince our clients of the exact usage. And then I believe we have a Python person, surprisingly.
Parcelton, that's
yes.
cool.
We're looking for.
I'm with Leading Edge, and we are always looking for senior .NET and senior Java. So if that's interesting to you, chat with me. But all 3 companies strongly endorse. Very cool. So that's what I got, and now it's time to turn us over to Burton, who's going to be talking about something I will not name for its evilness, and then web components for its awesomeness.
I'll take that.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out, Burton. We appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
Come on, baby.
Yes. You good?
You good? Great. Good.
All right. Sweet. Thank you very much for coming. I'm very excited. Who's this is their first time at a meetup before, ever? Or at least this meetup. Yeah. Oh, cool. Awesome. Front row. That's very bold of you. Like, right up here. I mean, you're part of it. Awesome. I am Burton Smith. You can find me at most stuff at Stuffbreaker. That's my handle on Blue Sky, Twitter, Mastodon if you're on one of those fancy social networks. So feel free to reach out. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, whatever you want. I love talking to people, especially about technology and coding stuff. So feel free to reach out and geek out. So just on the same note that Matt talked about, Stir Trek's coming up. I'm speaking at Stir Trek, and because of that, I get this super secret code that will give you a discount. If you want to go, you can participate and go at a cheaper price. So hopefully that's helpful to anyone who wants to go and hang out and see a really cool event. I don't know who's never been before? Never? It's awesome. I highly recommend going to Stir Trek. It's very fun. Cool. All right. So web forms to web components. I started out my software engineering career. I actually started in PHP, but we don't like to talk about that as much. My actual like full-time paid gig was working with web forms. Now, I loved web forms when they came out. But unfortunately, when you talk to people about web forms these days, you don't usually get the most positive feedback. Let's talk about that for a second, all right? So web forms were cool. Here's what made web forms cool, is that you had, yeah, right? Oh, the good old days. You had this canvas that was basically like a terrible WYSIWYG editor where you could drag widgets onto the page and build your user interface to it. All right, and then you could like double click on the button, and within this space, without ever having to really go into code that much, you could like add event handlers and things like that. It was pretty magical, especially for someone who was brand new at software engineering. This was a pretty cool tool because well, I knew nothing, so this was very helpful, right? Now the code that came out of that was always pretty interesting. The cool thing that came with this, so we get this kind of hodgepodge of regular HTML, but then you get these like really fancy, here I'm going to use, oh no, shoot. Sorry, spoiler alert. All right, I have this remote so I don't like run around on stage all the time. We have these like really cool little, these little like special HTML elements, right? That floated around in there. They were kind of weird that we could add in that added special features on top of our regular HTML. So with that was usually encapsulated quite a bit of markup and style and things like that. So if you knew nothing about making applications look nice, you could get a relatively consistent looking user interface just by dragging these widgets onto the page. And they were all nicely self-contained and had a lot of niceness baked into them, right? And this was really fun because, I kind of spoiled this already, but they also called this RAD. They called it Rapid Application Development, right? Because you could just like jam in all these components on a page and build a user interface and map it up to events and tie it to a database in a really insecure way. And it was really cool, right? Everyone was very excited about it. And they had a really cool name that went with it. So how could it be wrong, right? How could you go wrong with RAD development, okay? Well, here's where it went wrong. There's one thing that the web is not, and that is stateful, right? It is a stateless environment. So as you go from one page to another, it doesn't remember anything about what you did on the last page. And as you click and submit a form, it'll refresh the page and reload everything, and it doesn't remember what was on the form before you submitted the form, right? So they're like, don't worry, we got this. We're gonna make it stateful. And so what they did is they crammed a whole bunch of random crap into your user experience, right? That all of our forms and inputs and things. Now this is just for one input, right? It gets weirder. Like there was like this view state that would end up like at a global level that would get very big, and you had to like do weird things to it to keep it from crashing your page or maxing out your memory and stuff like that. So they would do this crazy stuff to try to maintain the state from either page refreshes or as you move from one place in the application to another. So it just became very difficult to work around this bloat that just would spawn itself into your code that you would then have to wrangle on a regular basis. So they were like, okay, we gotta fix this a little bit. So the next thing they rolled out with was this idea of MVC. They basically copied other frameworks and they were like, hey, that's working for them. Ruby, they seem to have it going. Like Ruby on Rails is the new hotness. Let's have a ASP.NET MVC, and we'll have this thing called a model, view, and controller where we control our data flow and how it gets mapped and everything like that. And everyone's like, yeah, this is awesome. This is really cool. Except for it kind of got a little weird when you started building out templating in there. They had these things called Razor templates, and they had these things called tag helpers or HTML helpers, right? And as you can see, it's kind of weird looking. Like it doesn't look like HTML, right? You had to call these functions to be able to render your UI elements, pass in all these objects and everything, and to assign classes. That little @ class, that was my friend all the time. And look, and if you can't tell, anyone know what UI framework or UI library they're using in this example? Anyone give a guess?
Bootstrap.
Boom, Bootstrap. That was like the magic for everything, right? MVC app, sprinkle with Bootstrap, you got a beautiful looking application, right? And every MVC app was a Bootstrap app. They all looked pretty much the same because everyone did the same thing. And so people were like, you know, I don't think this is right either. This feels weird, and then we're doing these weird things. Like you have a model, and sometimes your model gets a little weird, and so you have a view bag. Anyone remember a view bag? You just dumped a whole bunch of junk in there and hopefully tried to map it into your UI, and you're like, this doesn't feel efficient. It feels like kind of brittle code as well, and it kind of was, right? MVC is still around. MVC is still a really good pattern, don't get me wrong. But the way we kind of approached it, I had a friend tell me these were the dark years of .NET development during MVC, because things got kind of weird during this process. And so because of this weirdness, people were like, okay, it's cool. I'll use MVC architecture for my backend, and we'll just slap in some UI framework that we can then map our API calls to. Back in the day, we called it AJAX calls. Right? And now we have fetch requests, which are much nicer than our AJAX calls. But yeah, we'd send these AJAX calls to our MVC endpoints, have to fetch it and pull it back in. And we had that's when single page applications were so hot and everyone wanted a single page application, and now they're kind of not as cool anymore. But yeah, AngularJS, anyone written AngularJS recently?
No.
Not recent, thank you. Good job, I appreciate that. Yeah, our e-commerce site was written on AngularJS, and that was, I remember it was so cool, and then it wasn't anymore, and it was very hard to fight with all the time. So, but yeah, we have all these tools, and these, again, many of these tools are still viable. Anyone still using this guy right here? Rocking jQuery? Anyone? Oh.
Because we're still on web forms.
Oh, because you're still on forms.
If
so
I mentioned
sorry.
a minimal application, then yes.
Yeah, I do you know what? jQuery is still kind of cool. Yeah, don't get me wrong.
It depends on what device my users are on.
Yeah, okay, that makes a difference. The device where it's being used. It's still a really nice, like, we have really good JavaScript APIs, which actually I think were inspired a lot by jQuery, the cool stuff that came from jQuery. And jQuery is like, that's cool, we'll still be relevant. You can still use our APIs, we'll just swap them out with the browser APIs under the hood. So now we're super lightweight. So jQuery still, I think, has a really cool place. And actually with web forms, don't get me wrong, I know that's what we're talking about today, but with web forms and jQuery, you can get really far with your applications, really, really far without having to build crazy architectures for it. So pretty cool. So then we started, decoupling our backends from our front ends really heavily. We got into the Jamstack. You guys familiar with that term? JavaScript API and markup. That's where we, split everything. We're like, what? Put all the logic on the front end. We'll put all our, everything's in JavaScript now. And basically, our APIs are our highways, so to speak. So we got leaned really heavy on the front end, and now people are like, maybe that's not the best way to do it either. We do these weird swings. And so we have Razor Pages. Anyone using Razor Pages today? Yeah, a little bit. I like Razor Pages. We'll talk about Razor Pages more in detail here. But Razor Pages rolled out, and with it came kind of a new iteration of markup, right? I showed you that cool MVC tag helpers that we had before. Well, now we have a new iteration of tag helpers where we actually have what looks more like HTML. We have a lot more control over our markup that's being rendered on the page, but we also get these really cool, let me see if I can do this here, these like ASP4, kind of little helper attributes that we can sprinkle on top of our existing markup to then create these cool data bindings within our application. I like that. I think that's cool. It's this nice kind of progressive enhancement kind of way of approaching our user interfaces. We're still using the platform with our HTML. We're not overly abstracting it sometimes when we don't need to. But then we get our enhancements when we want to by using these cool attributes. I really dig it. It's nice. And then we also have this guy. Anyone using Blazor these days? Blazor is kind of a cool technology. It allows you to kind of write your UIs without using a ton of JavaScript and things like that. You basically write your front-end logic in C#, and then it compiles down into WebAssembly, which is basically the browser's version of assembly code, right? And that executes without having to go through the JavaScript runtime and parser and everything in the browser. So you can run that through all your kind of user interactions and user experience through C# instead of having to write JavaScript. Anyone feel like writing C# is better than writing JavaScript? Blasphemy. Get out of here. No, I'm just joking. C# is a very elegant language, and I think that's why TypeScript is also so popular, just because written by the same guy, right? So they kind of have a lot of shared experiences in there, which is awesome. So yeah, very cool. I feel like sometimes this is not always the right choice. And actually, when you talk to people, and I think Microsoft's official stance is, if you're migrating off of web forms, go to Blazor. And I don't agree with that one as much. Partly because I think Blazor introduces a new technology in a very sophisticated way, which is WebAssembly. And not everyone knows exactly how to use WebAssembly or how to tune it or how to optimize for it. And that's very complicated. Whereas I feel like web forms is kind of this happy medium. Do you have some experience with that? Is that what's happening over here? Yeah? What have you run into with Blazor?
Well, older versions of Blazor are not multi-threaded, which is small gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing how to properly use WebAssembly can be challenging.
Yes.
So everything that you're throwing into the browser, you need to make sure you pay attention to what form WebAssembly, especially for the client.
Yeah. Now, have you run into browser inconsistencies between WebAssembly at all? Yeah. Okay. I also ran into that a little bit when I was experimenting with it, and so that's why I think it can become very complicated very fast. And so Blazor is very cool technology, very cool ideas behind it. But I feel like to say everyone who is on web forms, you should go to Blazor, I feel like is not setting them up for success. I think that's a very scary recommendation sometimes, because it takes a lot of extra cognitive load to understand what's happening with your Blazor app. So yeah, just a quick little snippet. It kind of looks and feels like the old school web forms, in that you kind of have your logic up front, and then you have this kind of little code behind logic that you could call on the same page if you wanted to, and tightly couple your UI logic with your markup, which is kind of nice. I think that has a nice developer experience involved with it. So there are some cool things about it, don't get me wrong, but it is there be dragons, let me tell you. You gotta be careful with that. All right, so now let's talk about web components. Who's heard of web components before? Who's used web components before? Oh, okay. Yeah, web components, it's funny, web components have been around forever, right? They've been around since HTML5 rolled out. They kind of went through a few iterations. They went from V0 to V1, which made them significantly more user-friendly, but they didn't really start taking traction until a certain internet browser died, IE11. That was kind of the last holdout in terms of allowing these evergreen browsers to really adopt the spec and make it very easy for teams to use and adopt it. So let's talk about web components really quick, and then we'll show some examples of how that all works. So web components, for those of you who may not be able to see that, is a suite of different technologies allowing you to create reusable custom elements with their functionality encapsulated away from the rest of your code and utilize them in your web apps. And that's from MDN. And so most people, when they hear about web components, maybe haven't heard about web components, but they've heard about some of their technologies. Now, really quick before we get too far into it, like obviously we talked about our web components. They've been around forever, but this has been a question for a lot of people for a long time. So someone actually created a site. I'll save you a click. You guys are welcome to scan the QR code, but I'll save you a click, and I'll go right here. Our web components. Oh, where's my mouse? There we go. A thing yet? Oh, you can't see it because I have it on the wrong page. Here we go. I know. There we go. Hey, the grand reveal. Yes. All right. And so with that, this might be kind of weird when I start coding, so we may have to switch up our display settings here. But you can scroll down, and it's like, hey, who's using web components these days? and pretty much anyone who's using web components. If you take a look at this list here, pretty impressive. And actually, where I spent a lot of my time doing web components was right here, this guy. I was at Microsoft for about 4 years, building out design systems with web components. Anyone worked with design systems before? Who knows what a design system is? It's a weird term. Unfortunately, it's kind of misleading because most people who hear design systems are like, oh, some kind of like Figma or design tool or like Photoshop. No, it's none of those things whatsoever. It's really, design systems are, how do we build applications? That's how we document and build features so that we can create scalable user interfaces, right? So who's used Material UI before? That's a design system. Material is Google's design system. Who's used Fluent UI before? That is Microsoft's design system. Who has used Bootstrap before? That was kind of Twitter's first design system, right? Twitter Bootstrap was what it was called originally. It's still, I don't know if I would still consider it a design system. It's more of a library, but it's very much like that. That's a good mental model if you want to think about what a design system is, right? It provides you a template and a set of guidelines for how to build stuff. So yeah, web components are alive and well, used widely, especially in enterprise solutions. Now the reason why they are so cool in these environments is because they are part of the HTML spec. They are, or actually the JavaScript spec, where you can literally define custom elements and use them framework agnostically. So whether you're using Vue, React, .NET, PHP, Markdown, whatever it is, guess what? Those all play beautifully with web components. We'll show you here in a sec. So now back to our presentation. Okay. So when we talk about web components, it's usually a combination of multiple technologies. So some people have heard of custom elements. Some people have heard of HTML templates. If you haven't, that's probably the least known one. And the last one is Shadow DOM. Who's heard of the Shadow DOM? Sounds very mysterious, right? Very cool. Yeah, that's where we'll talk about those here in a second, right? Custom elements. First things first. Custom elements, the ability to create custom elements that encapsulate your functionality in an HTML page, rather than having make do with a long nested batch of elements that together provide a custom page feature. So just like, who's used React before? Who's used Vue.js before? Who's used Angular before? All right, a lot of those are very component-centric libraries, right? They allow you to encapsulate your style and your behavior into a single tag, right? That you can then add to your markup and have execute a specific thing. Well, that's exactly what custom elements are, except for they do it in the browser, not in your library. So one, they're super performant because it's the browser executing them, not JavaScript library. And two, they plug and play anywhere. Very convenient, right? Especially if you're building a design system for multiple teams. This is why we see so much popularity and traction in enterprise solutions. How many of you guys have, in your organization, been through an acquisition? You guys are so lucky. Nobody's been through an acquisition before? Oh my gosh.
I usually leave right before they announce it.
Oh, wow. Well played. All right. How many of you have more than one front-end library or framework used at your company? More than one. All right. How many of you have built UI elements and wished you could reuse them in more than one of your projects before? Oh yeah, definitely. All right. So that's, I think, where we see a lot of traction is because these enterprises have very complex footprints in terms of their digital landscape. They have, this team built their application in Angular, this team built their application in Vue, this team built their application in jQuery, right? so now you're like, okay, well, let's say we're building reusable components that all of them can reuse. How do we do that? Well, custom elements is a really good tool for that. So enterprises tend to really like this because they're very efficient. Cool. Shadow DOM, the very mysterious Shadow DOM. The Shadow DOM API is a key part of this, providing a way to attach a hidden separate DOM to an element. I'll show you an example of this here in a second. This provides the ability to keep the markup structure, style, and behavior hidden and separate from the other code on the page so that different parts do not clash and the code can be kept nice and clean. All right, so literally what it does is it takes your content of your component and hides it away in its own little DOM tree. Okay, this is really cool for a couple reasons. One, styles, global styles do not affect it. So if somebody comes in and accidentally says, writes a CSS selector that says button, background, pink, exclamation point, important, right? If they do that, it's not going to blow up your whole system. Your web components are going to stay isolated from that, and it's not going to affect your components, any of the elements within the shadow DOM. All right. The other thing that's really important too is that also hides it from JavaScript selectors. Perfect example of something that happened a couple jobs ago when I was working on an e-commerce platform. We had a team come in and work on build a cool feature for us. It's really nice using AngularJS. Terribly sorry. I don't know anyone from Texas. So. Where they would, and they wrote this beautiful user interface using all this stuff. We were using, like I said, AngularJS and jQuery for this. And they decided to drop in a jQuery plugin to style the select inputs. The same person, they knew that you were here too. Jeez.
I want to talk about my car's extended warranty.
So they always want to buy my house. I don't know what's up with that. So it looked beautiful. What they did looked great. The only problem is they, on their jQuery selector, when they selected the select elements, all they did was say select all select elements, which was fine for that part of the application they built for, but broke the select elements for the rest of the application, right? Because they had created this very generic selector to select everything. If we were using web components with a shadow DOM, it would have protected us from that a little bit and sheltered us from it, which would have been really nice. Cool. HTML templates. This one is kind of a not as popular on a regular basis, but it's a the template HTML element is a mechanism for holding HTML that is not to be rendered immediately when the page is loaded, but may be instantiated subsequently at runtime using JavaScript. So basically what it is it's literally an HTML element that's template, and then anything you put inside of there is inert. Nothing happens with it. It doesn't get rendered. It doesn't get executed. It's not until you actually select that, and then you can stamp it out and clone it wherever you want to throughout the application, which is kind of nice, right? You can reuse the markup that way. With the introduction of template literals and things in JavaScript, it's not as often used on a regular basis for custom elements, with the exception of declarative shadow DOM. That's something that is probably outside the scope of this conversation today. So, all right. Any questions on those three really quick before we move on? It's pretty straightforward. I'll show you examples of all this here in a second. All right. Custom elements everywhere. Oh, this is just a fun little site. Again, I'll save you a click here. Let me go over. I think I already have it. All right, custom elements everywhere. Basically what this is somebody decided to set up a suite of tests to rate frameworks to say, hey, how well do you support custom elements and web components? Which is really cool because now as you go through, you can be like, oh, okay, oh, looks like React looks pretty good. Didn't used to. React below React 19, it was our problem child. As of React 19, you can just drop those tags in there and use them, which is fantastic. Let's see, we've got, oh, Vue. That's a good one. Angular is really good. See, look at all this green. That's so great. Oh, AngularJS, let us down. Hopefully you're not using that too much anymore. Preact is lovely. Polymer. I thought this one was interesting because Polymer generates web components, so I'm not sure why it has failing tests on it. Maybe because it's not supported anymore, probably, or as much anymore. Lit is its successor, so it makes sense that that one is great. So you can see all, if you have a framework that you're using, you can go through and be like, oh, how do web components or custom elements score in this? And then make adjustments to your implementation if you need to. So pretty cool, pretty cool. All right, and the last thing I want to show you is actually the Web Components Toolkit. I'll talk a little bit more about this as I do the demo, but the Web Components Toolkit is something that I built. This is an open source project that I work on. When I started at Microsoft, I was like, web components can go anywhere. They can be used anywhere. It's amazing. They're so cool. And I loved how amazing this promise of web components was. Well, when I went there and I started helping developers use our web components, I realized that it was not as beautiful as I thought it would be. There was a bit of a gap in the developer experience. So as teams started using our web components, they're like, this is great and all, but I literally get no developer experience when I use these. And actually, here, I can show you really quick. I've got, here, let me see if I can change my display mode really quick. Back over here so I can see it better. I do not want to extend, I want to mirror. Where is that? Present. Oh, maybe that was one. Oh, there we go. I want mirror. Yes, good. Okay, so let me pull up. I don't want to show you too much here, but I'm just going to create a random HTML file really quick. Test.html. And I'll throw in a little doc here. Let me do this. Zoom in. All right, so if I wanted to use a custom element, so first of all, if I use like regular HTML, for example, let's say I have an input. I'm going to say oops, up there. Come down here, and I want to use an input. I have this cool thing called Emmet where I can start typing, and it's going to give me these cool little hints. Be like, oh, I see you're trying to go for an input. Do you want an input button? You know, checkbox? Oh, and I can say yes, please, and thank you. And it'll autocomplete for me and things like that. And when I hover over this stuff, oh, thank you, but no thank you right now. It'll give me information about, you know, what this does. Oh, there's no type definition. But like, you know, button, I can just type in button and it'll autocomplete and it'll tell me when I'm using things wrong. Usually, not as much in HTML, but yeah, it'll start complaining if I type things in incorrectly or using APIs incorrectly. And I get that when I use like Angular and React and other code too, right? It'll give me TypeScript errors and say, hey, you're using this wrong. You should not be using this API that way. That's really nice, right? In here, if I start creating, let's say I have a custom element and I say my button, well, oh, it knows that I have done that a whole bunch of times. Thanks. Thank you very much, AI, but yes. So it added autocomplete, but I don't get that Emmet, you know, autocomplete behavior or anything like that. I can start typing in whatever I want, and it doesn't even know if it's right or wrong. It doesn't care, right? And so our devs were using our components, and they would have a spelling error. Maybe we did have an attribute called stuff, but they left the U out, and they're like, "Thank you." But they don't know that it's not. They're like, "Why isn't this working?" And we're like, "Oh, it looks right. Oh, you missed the U," and they weren't getting any kind of feedback on it. And it was very frustrating for them. They wouldn't get build errors, all that kind of stuff that we're used to. So I said, you know what, there's got to be a better way to do this. So that's where the Web Components Toolkit comes in. So I built in a ton of tooling specifically for either building web components or consuming web components, depending on what side of it you're on. If you're building web components, we have integrations for things like Storybook. Anyone use Storybook before? Oh man, if you're building components for the web, I highly recommend using Storybook. It's a very cool way to build your components in isolation, and they give you all these cool little controls to like tweak it and test it in a preview and stuff. Check it out, super cool.
You can give it to a product manager, product owner, and say like, hey, here's your problems. Oh, this is great. I can experiment with it.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, they can put in values and tweak the attributes and stuff. Very cool, very, very cool. So, integration tools like that. But then there's also integration tools for developers who are using it so that they can have better autocomplete, IntelliSense, contextual information, stuff like that. I'll show you that here in a second. But let's get back to .NET. .NET and web components and how those work together. So what I did is I created a little application, and in it, so here, we'll close that for now. In my layout, this is just a Razor Pages demo that I just did the .NET new Razor Pages, and it spun this up for me. So there's nothing really fancy going on here. Now there's a couple of things that I added to make this demo work. All right, the first one is I added in here, a link and a script tag. And those are for the Web Awesome library. Has anyone heard of Web Awesome before? Has anyone heard of Font Awesome? You've heard of Web Awesome? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Now, Font Awesome, most people have heard of Font Awesome. They are an icon library that has just a bazillion icons that you can choose from and add to your application, which is amazing. But then Web Awesome is an open source and a pro. They have a pro version too of a web component library that you can add and use for free. So Web Awesome, in case you haven't seen it, it's just webawesome.com. And in it, you can jump in here. Also, Font Awesome and Web Awesome's videos are hilarious. I highly recommend watching them. They're very funny. So if I go to Docs, you can see in here they have all kinds of stuff showing you how to use these in different scenarios. Framework integrations, the component list of all the components that they provide and you can use, which is really cool. Let me see if I can grab a pretty rad example here. Let's try the QR code generator. That's a fun one, by the way. Check that out. Let's see. Let's do a call out. So in here, they'll provide examples and kind of interactive examples that you can look at. You can look at the code example, copy and paste it, and you can even pop it out into a sandbox and play with it in a sandbox and add other components in there too, which is a really cool way to be able to experiment with some of these components. So basically all I did is these pretty much exact same things right here. I grabbed these and I dropped them into my layout page. That's it. I didn't have to add a framework or anything else. No React, no Vue, no Angular, right? Just drop those in. And then I went to my index. Let's start with the CS side. I decided to create a form for this that has a form input model. Created this object with some attribute decorators on here for validation, stuff like that, right? So whether or not it's required, what kind of value it should be, whether it's a string, etc. So pretty standard stuff, nothing fancy here, right? Anyone confused with this yet? Nope, cool. All right, so then I have also this. So this is my page model for the index page. And then in here I have an on-post action. That came out of the box. I didn't have to do anything fancy with that. So cool. So now let's go to our markup. In our markup, what I have is, I have a standard form that has a post method on it. And then inside I have these fancy schmancy HTML tags. W input, WA select, WA text area, and that's Web Awesome web components happening right there. So those are my components that I just dropped in on the page. And then that's it. And so we saw what happened before when we didn't have any tooling in place for our custom elements. When I did my element or whatever, it's kind of boring, didn't have anything. Well, now with I'm using a Visual Studio Code extension that I built that now gives me a ton of information about this, right? It'll tell me, okay, attributes and properties that I can use on this. It'll tell me all my, what else do I have here? Oh, this is a big one, sorry. Slots, so I can slot in custom markup and things like that, which is cool. Any custom methods that I have on here if I want to validate stuff. CSS parts, CSS states, CSS variables, anything that I need to know about this custom element so that I can use it, customize it, whatever I want to do, right? So yeah, I have that information now. It also will tell me if I mess something up. So if I say input, let's see if find an attribute here. Let's say that I'm going to flag it with required. It's going to be autocomplete for that. Also, this is something that it took me way too long to figure out. If I say required false, if I do that on a regular HTML element, what happens? It's still going to be required because it's what we call a Boolean attribute, right? So just the presence of having it there means it's true no matter what. So even if I put true or false or whatever in there, it's always going to be required. I have to remove the whole thing for it to actually not be required anymore. Well, good news is this will actually yell at me and tell me, hey, don't do that, all right? Don't put a value on there. That doesn't do anything. Remove the value, please, and thank you, and then it'll be happy again. And it works. Back to our good state. So it gives me API validation as well for my components. And this is in a CS HTML file. That'll do that for me in a Markdown file, an HTML file, a PHP file, whatever kind of file I'm writing my components in. This kind of validation and autocomplete will be available for me, which is really nice. So now let's spin this bad boy up. This is where it gets rad, right here, all right? Boom! There's my form, right? Those are my web awesome components. Again, I didn't have any framework or anything right there. I didn't even have to use jQuery or Bootstrap. I'm just using Web Awesome under the hood, and it gives me this very, very sexy form, right? Now, let's look at what's happening under the hood here. If I inspect this, don't worry, I promise we'll zoom. Let's put it at the bottom. Okay, so there's my input. You can see all the attributes that I added on here. And now I see this shadow root. There's our shadow DOM happening right there. Now inside of the shadow DOM, you see that I have a label. I have a slot if I want to add a custom label. I have a base, and inside that base, I have a slot, inputs, blah, blah, blah. A whole bunch of markup, whole bunch of customizations that I can make to this thing to make it look really cool and fancy however I want to, right? Very flexible, very powerful. And again, all of that is encapsulated into my custom element. It comes back and it's just this guy right here. My little input element block. My little a little too aggressive with this pop-up bubble here. But yeah, it's this input element. And again, it's just one tag that I drop on the page that encapsulates all of that for me. So I can even come in here. Let's get a little crazy here. Just a second. Style. And I can say input, because I know there's at least a couple inputs on that page, right? And I'm going to say background color pink. Bang. Muy importante. All right, and I'm going to refresh that really quick just to make sure I have the latest and greatest. Oh, it didn't do anything. But if I throw my regular just input on the page, we'll just do standard input. And I come back. Oh, I got to refresh. Oh, look at that. I don't want that, right? No, that's not what I wanted. I want to keep it encapsulated, protected, consistent, right? I want to keep things consistent across my app. So cool. So I don't need that anymore. Well, the other thing that's cool here is that if you look, I've also added just some very basic wire up to my APIs. So now I have a name, and that's for my form input name, right? And that goes back to my object back here, form input model. And now I'm wiring that up to my UI, and I can say favorite animal, comment, agreed, blah, 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 right? So if I come back here, let's refresh this again. And I start filling this out. First of all, it's got built-in validation into it. So if I accidentally try to submit it, it's going to say, oh, yeah, it's not going to let me submit it back to the server. Actually, while this is running, let's go ahead and throw a breakpoint in here if we have it. Oh, we have a breakpoint. Good. We'll keep a breakpoint here so that when it actually does get submitted, we know and we can check it out. Okay. So now, okay, this is required. Test, favorite animal, cats. Test 1, 2, 3, and again, If I try to submit it, it's not going to let me. This is still required. So now if I check it, I'm going to click submit. All right, cool. So model state is valid, is false. That's weird. I wonder why that is. Let's look at the model state in here. This has a value, so that one's good, right? This, oh. When a checkbox or a radio button is checked in HTML, what is the value? On. I don't know why. I don't know why they did that, but they did, all right? So now when it tries to map back to our model, it sees a string instead of a Boolean value. So it says on, I don't know what to do with that. It's not checked, so it's false. So what we can do, and this is what you have to do this with standard HTML as well, is we're gonna say, okay, for this checkbox, we're gonna say value equals, oops, thank you, value equals true. And we'll refresh this bad boy. We'll check it again. Test. Favorite animals, cats. Test 1, 2, 3. And I submit it. Cool. Come back and check. Yay, it's true. It is valid. Oh, but I want to see the rest of it, please. Thank you. Yeah, it's valid. Cool. And I can see the raw view of all that stuff. And I can see that my form, all the form value stuff is all there. So one thing that's really cool, that's kind of a recent development in the last few years with web components, is they have this thing called element internals, which allow you to make form-associated custom elements, or FACE for short, if you can't remember it. So if you have form-associated custom elements, you can literally teach the browser that this custom element, my component here, is an input. And that way it can participate with the form element itself. So that's what's happening behind the scenes is we have this mapped up here, right? We have this name element mapped up, name attribute mapped up to our model in the back end. What that's doing is that's just grabbing our data from the form method post and then serializing that to our object. So what's happening here is we're actually saying, hey, no, these are legit inputs. These are legit, HTML elements. Take those two, grab that information. And so they built it into the WebAwesome component so that they participate appropriately with the browser, which is pretty cool. So now your elements behave like native elements, which means they play really, really well in a .NET environment, especially things like Razor pages, because it's the .NET is just using the native browser APIs for a lot of this stuff. It's very cool, very, very cool. Any questions on that? Yeah.
I have a good question for you. In what way do web components, especially with how they interact with Shadow DOM, how would they impact things to this automated testing for like UI for frameworks such as Selenium or Playwright?
Oh, that's such a good question. So when you're doing automated tests for, let's say, for a view component, when you render a view component on the page, you don't ever see the view component, right? It gets compiled away by the JavaScript framework, and you just get markup at the end of the day. Well, when we look at it in here, we inspect these, excuse me. We see the WA input tag. That stays persistent on the page all the time. And then inside is the shadow root. Now this gets tricky because how's your JavaScript supposed to look inside and validate what the values are and things like that? I have two answers for you from two different sides of things. If you are a web component author, you should definitely be looking inside and validating that the internals of your component are operating correctly. And you can do that by, there's two different shadow root modes. There's either an open or a closed. With the open shadow root mode, you can actually do, you can select inside of it. It will, so for example, here, I'll just show you so that we can all participate. So we have our WA input. I'm just gonna go ahead and go to my console. Actually, here, I'll just right click this bad boy. Nope. won't right click that. We'll do a $0 because it won't let me. $0, and that's gonna, little trick, I don't know if you guys knew that or not, but if you're in the browser and you're focused on an element and you go to the console and do $0, it's automatically gonna select that element for you. So cool little shortcut. So in here, so if I say $0, it's telling me, okay, you're focused on the input. If I say $0.0.querySelector input, like I want to try to find the input inside, it's going to come back with null. But what I can do, if the shadow root mode is open, I can say, instead of this, oops, oh, not that. $0 dot shadow root dot query selector input. Whoa, that's not that. That's that. Input. There we go. Now I can select the internals of the element by using the shadow root, selecting the shadow root first, then query selector do it. Now, if my shadow root is closed, it won't let me do it at all. If you try to select the shadow root, it's going to return null. So if you are testing the internals, you can still peek inside by using tools like that. Now, there's a lot of really cool testing tools that sit on top of web components that have a very simple syntax, so you can actually just pierce the shadow DOM, as they like to say, and get right in there pretty easily. Now, my recommendation, if you are a consumer of web components, if you're building an application with web components, you should not be testing the internals of the tool itself. You should be treating it like it's an HTML element, right? Now, I'm going to show you guys a secret. What time are we done here, Matt?
Whenever you're done.
Everyone's falling asleep, so I'll try not to. I'm just joking. So
we'll get kicked down around 8:30, so before then.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to show you something very. This will make you so cool at parties. I can't wait for you guys to like. All right.
My eyes.
Input, and we're going to do an input of type date. This is a browser's native date picker, right? So let's check this out really quick. If you guys haven't seen this before, very cool little straightforward date picker that you can add to a page. Pretty easy. So now I'm going to show you this trick and make you so awesome. If you go to open up your developer tools, if you're in a Chromium, this works in Chromium browsers. So Chrome, Edge, Brave, blah, 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 if it's Chromium based or Chromium itself, right? You can do that. We're going to click on this little gear icon here. And that's going to take us to, actually it's the big gear icon here. And I'm going to go to my preferences. I'm going to scroll down to, I think it's here, 1 second. Oh, there we go, Elements section. And if you check, Show User Agent Shadow DOM. Okay. Now, I told you there's 2 modes to Shadow DOM. There's actually a third mode, and it's like God mode Shadow DOM, which we don't have access to, right? We can't use that one. Only the browsers can. And they call it User Agent Shadow DOM. So once that's enabled in your editor, we're going to go to our date picker component. I'm going to go inspect. And what's going to happen is I have my input. And inside, next to our standard input, I'll now see this little chevron that I can expand, and I see there's a shadow root, and there's that user agent God mode shadow root, and then inside of that, did you know that a date picker is just a whole bunch of divs and spans inside of there?
Oh,
I know, right? The audacity! I thought it was way cooler. But the cool thing is you can actually see inside the internals of it. You can see, okay. We have a pseudo selector. You guys, we don't have access to a pseudo attribute, but I think we've all seen these before if you've ever worked with CSS. --webkit --datetime --edit --fields --wrapper, right? That allows you to select elements inside of there and apply styles to them. You can do that with custom elements too with shadow parts, which is pretty cool. But, so now I can see inside of this element itself, and yeah, I even have my little button over there, which is cool. So I can select that and hide it if I want to. Very nifty, very nifty. So now you guys are like, can go show this off. You're welcome. I know, it's very fun. I know. Matt, you already are the life of the party, man. All right. Cool. I'm sorry. Did that answer your question?
Certainly.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's how you can peek into it and get access to it. So, oh yeah, to extend on that answer a little bit. So when I tell people if they're consuming and using Shadow DOM, they should treat them like HTML elements. So when I'm testing a date picker component, I'm not going in and trying to dig into these divs and spans in here to see what these values are, right? Instead, what I'm doing is I'm saying, select the input and tell me the value. Well, guess what? I can do exactly the same thing here. I can select this input, my WA input. Let's grab that little fella. Close that. When I say $0 again, dot, and I want to see what the value is for it. Value. There it is. So I'm going to test them the same way as I would a native input element. I'm going to use the APIs provided by the component because the component stays there all the time, no matter what, which is nice because that gives you an anchor point to be able to do that. So the other cool thing is that you also have access to the functions and methods of that component. Like I can't typically call the internals of my React components, right? Once it's on the page, it's on the page. I can't be like, oh, but the input, I want to try to call the validate function in there. And I can't really do that. But here, I can definitely do that. I can say $0 because I'm going to select that again. And I'm going to say check validity. I want to see how valid that is. It's a function, and it is valid because I said it was required and it needed to have value. Now, if I remove the value, and I try that again, false, it's not valid anymore. So I use the actual APIs of the component as part of my testing lifecycle, not digging into the internals of it. Makes sense. Cool. Good question. Awesome. Any other questions on that? Nice. Okay. I think, hold on one sec, let me check. Oh, he's got another one. What? Yes. Or are you just scratching your head?
I'm sorry.
I'm just scratching my head like this. It's
I have a special technique, I'm sorry. That's confusing.
cool. Awesome. Let me check. Oh yeah, I did want to show you. So the Web Components Toolkit piece of this. So in here we're using a plugin that is the Web Components language server. This is the extension that I wrote. This is available for most editors. The only one that I don't have available yet, ironically, is Visual Studio. And that is because Visual Studio is one of the most painful editors to write extensions for. I don't know why they've done this, but it is very annoying to write extensions for them. And I've been working on it since, I think I talked to you about this talk, probably months.
January 14th.
Yeah, January. And I still haven't been able to roll it out yet because it just is so stubborn and difficult. But if you're using any other editors, anyone using JetBrains Writer or any other JetBrains editor, Visual Studio Code obviously has one, or any of its forks if you're using like Cursor or any of those also have this tooling in it. The cool thing too is that if you're using AI tools, they have integrations built in for that as well, and it'll use the diagnostic information from this to help correct problems and things in there too. So it has some.
And if folks wanted to give this server a 5-star review on the various marketplaces, I'm sure it would not go amiss.
Right. I wouldn't be sad. Thanks. Yeah. So these tools are available. They're free. You guys can take advantage of them. If you guys want to start building web components and having a good experience with them, that's the goal of these. So if you run into a problem or if you don't like something, you're like, oh, this could be better, let me know. I'm totally happy with trying to fix these up. So so you can see a list of all this stuff at the Web Components Toolkit site. you can see all the tools that we have for building out these experiences and making them smooth and effective for teams. And lots of editor support, JSX, Vue, all that stuff. Lots of integrations for that. So awesome. Any questions on web components or any of this stuff? I know it's kind of obscure. We have kind of two weird technologies coming together, but actually I think this is a very nice complementary technology. If you're not very comfortable writing JavaScript or a lot of this stuff, just drop in WebAwesome in there and you're good to go, right? Or build your own, and your .NET teams will love you because they can just drop yours in and they don't have to worry about writing UI code as much either, which is fantastic.
I think that's my question is this is not your talk, but how would I build my own web if I or my organization wanted to?
Yeah, good question. So there's a couple ways to do it. There's you can write vanilla web components with the API spec if you're a psychopath, because that's a crazy API. I mean, to be fair, I've actually written a handful of web components with the raw API, but there are actually really nice libraries that sit on top of or that compile web components for you that give you a really nice developer experience. My go-to is usually Lit, which we kind of saw there. I actually have a tool. Let's see, npm. Let me just go to my GitHub, that'll be easier. I have a starter kit with a CLI that you can just say npm init lit starter kit and then the name of your project, and it'll scaffold out a starter kit for you with a lot of these tools already pre-installed for you. So hopefully it makes it very easy for you to start using Storybook, having these integrations built in for frameworks and things like that. So let's see, it is lit starter kit. There we go. So it's you can run. There we go. npm init lit starter kit, and then your project name, and it'll scaffold out a component library for you that you can begin building on. This is actually what I use for when I do my workshops, like at CodeMash and things like that. I use a lit starter kit so people can just have something that they can literally walk out the door from that workshop with that works, and they can go to production with it that day if they want to. So in there's also testing tools, so if you want to be able to test them, validate that your APIs work, a lot of cool stuff in there. So that is a good place to start, I would recommend.
How do web components deal with like Playwright? If you're using Playwright to go to things, because you're saying it's hiding the stuff in the component.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
how does Playwright treat it?
that's a good question. So there are a couple ways you can handle that. So our testing libraries are written in Playwright because we want, obviously, these are a browser API. We want to test them in browsers and make sure they're working correctly. So there's a couple different ways you can do it, right? There's you can either do manual selection through the shadow DOM to say my element dot shadow root dot internal query selector internal button, and then click it that way. But actually, most libraries have tools that sit on top of it that make it very easy to look at. So, for example, have you guys heard of vtest? Who's heard of Vite before? It's a build tool for front-end projects, incredibly fast. They just rolled out version 8, and it's insane. It's so cool. So they have this tool called vtest, which is a test runner built on top of that. And in it, this is something that I have already begun exploring and I'm very excited about. They have something called vtest browser mode, which sits on top of Playwright. There we go, browser mode. And the API, if you're familiar with Jest or Mocha or Chai or a lot of these, it's very comparable. And in some ways they have adapters that you can just port over your existing tests to use vtest instead of whatever you're using before, which is pretty smart. but you can choose what browser you want to use. But I'm going to go down to, they have a specific library for lit, but I think it's available for other web component tools as well. But basically what it does is you say, okay, here's my counter element. You render that, a screen, and then you can say screen.getByRole. And so what's happening here is under this abstraction, it's doing that shadow root query selector for you. So you could just say, okay, in this component, look in the shadow root, getByRole my button with the name of increment, and then click it. So this is not too different than what existing tools do with frameworks, right? This is almost, I think this is pretty much the exact same API as if I were using Vue or React or something like that. They just built another abstraction layer into it to now peek into that shadow root to find it instead of trying to look on it on the global page itself.
Okay, and then what about, like, recently Claude introduced their browser extension that allows, like, I can talk to the web version of Claude and it can actually connect to my browser that has the thing in it. How's it doing with navigating these components?
It does pretty well. I haven't done a ton of that specific implementation in our testing, but
being accessible by an extension.
The cool thing also, sorry, there's a lot of cool things. I'll just keep saying that over and over again. The cool thing here is that my components APIs are documented in the browser. So if I say $0, I've registered all of the APIs for my component as well as the tag in the browser. So if I come in here, I can scroll through and I can see it's going to give me all of the HTML tags as well. But let's say value, right? So validators, validity, value has changed. Those are coming from my component. So if they're publicly available, the browser knows about it. Which means if the browser's talking, if Claude is talking to the browser, then Claude knows about it too.
That has to be good for accessibility as well.
Yes. Yep. Because you can now directly tie the behavior, map the behavior into the rest of your attributes and accessibility and stuff. So yeah. Pretty rad, pretty rad. This is truly rad development. We've gotten there. We've arrived, everyone. Good questions. Any other questions on this? Everyone's going to go home and write web components today. I knew it. It's fun. I honestly, when you start playing with it, you're like, this is kind of awkward. This is kind of weird. And I'm telling you that because you're going to feel that. And you're like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Nobody should use web components. I'm telling you, stick with it, because once you go web components, it's so hard to go back to other things because you're like, oh, I wish I had access to that now. Oh, I wish I could select that from another component the same way that I could here. Like, I love the fact that because those elements persist on the page, I can do query selectors down to grab one of those elements and find it and reference it if I need to. Change the values at runtime, right? I can go in and let's say I have, let's see how I can do this. Yeah, let's do this. I'm just going to grab my form element this time. Good, okay. Got my form. Now I can say query selector. And then I can say my WA input. So I should grab that first input. And then I could say dot value equals. Thanks for all the fish. Boom. Can't do that in React. Pretty cool. So because they persist, I have access to that at runtime. And I have access to the APIs at runtime as well. Pretty slick. Awesome. Any other questions? Trust me, stick with it. You'll have a blast. You'll have so much fun with that. It's very cool. Awesome. I think that's it for today. If there's nothing else, we can hang out and chat. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Burton.
Sure.
And as Burton said, hang out, chat, grab some pizza. Thanks for coming out. The weather should get nasty at 9, so I think we're good for a while.
Nice.